They mocked his old warplane until he wiped out an entire squadron. The sky over Europe in 1943 was a brutal classroom. For the American bomber crews and their fighter escorts, every mission was a final exam. Below, the sprawling formations of B-17s and B-24s pushed deeper into hostile territory, and up from the ground, the seasoned pilots of the Luftwaffe rose to meet them. In the cockpit of a P-47 Thunderbolt, Major Francis Gabreski would scan the cold, empty blue, knowing it was a lie. The enemy was always there. And for Gabreski and the men of the 56th Fighter Group, the challenge was twofold. They were fighting the Germans, and in a way, they were fighting their own plane. It was called the Jug, short for Juggernaut, a 7-ton monster that pilots joked was big enough to hide in if you got attacked. It was seen by many as too fat, too heavy, a clumsy giant in a sky full of nimble predators. But those critics and the enemy pilots who underestimated it were about to learn a brutal lesson, written in the fury of 8 50 caliber machine guns. This is the story of how an underdog pilot and his unloved warplane changed the rules of air combat. Chapter 1. The Flying Jug. To understand what was about to unfold in the skies over Germany, you first have to understand the machine at the heart of the story. When the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt first arrived in England, American pilots were skeptical, to say the least. Those who had flown the sleek British Spitfire were aghast at the Thunderbolt's size. It tipped the scales at over 17,000 pounds fully loaded, more than twice the weight of a German Bf-109. The jokes wrote themselves. Pilots quipped that in the event of an attack, you could just unstrap and run to the back for cover. The legendary ace Don Blakesley is said to have remarked, "It ought to be able to dive. It certainly can't climb." The complaints piled up. It was sluggish, it turned like a freight train, and its cockpit was so far back you felt like you needed binoculars just to see the nose. The British, with their dry wit, took one look at its bulky profile and nicknamed it the Jug. The name stuck. To its detractors, it was a flying bathtub, a big, clumsy target waiting to get shot down. The plane's immense size was the result of a revolutionary design choice. It was built around the most powerful piston engine of the war, the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. Critically, this engine was paired with a heavy, complex turbo supercharger system designed to feed the engine dense air and maintain its monstrous power in the thin, freezing atmosphere above 25,000 feet. At lower altitudes, where many dogfights took place, the system didn't offer the same advantages, contributing to the plane's reputation for being unwieldy. It was a high-altitude interceptor being thrust into any and every role. Into the cockpit of this underestimated machine stepped a man who was, in his own way, an underdog. Francis "Gabby" Gabreski, the son of Polish immigrants, had struggled through flight training. His instructors found him nervous, a pilot who wrestled with the controls, and he nearly washed out. But what Gabreski lacked in natural grace, he made up for with pure, relentless determination. When he joined the 56th Fighter Group, the first unit to take the P-47 into combat, he was an outsider. He'd spent time flying Spitfires with a Polish RAF squadron, and he wasn't shy about sharing his combat experience with pilots who had none. He was the outspoken leader of a squadron flying a plane few wanted, under the command of a brilliant tactician named Hubert or Hub Zemke. Together, Zemke's wolf pack would have to survive. They did it by realizing you don't fight a German ace on his terms, you fight him on yours. Chapter 2. The Ambush. A typical mission for the 56th Fighter Group was a ramrod mission, escorting hundreds of bombers deep into Germany. A typical greeting from the Luftwaffe was vicious and effective. German fighter doctrine often involved ignoring the escorts, using speed and numbers to slash through the bomber formations in a single, devastating pass. Their main targets were the B-17s and B-24 Fat Cows. Gabreski would spot them as a swarm of black dots, climbing with terrifying speed to position themselves for head-on attacks.
They were mostly Focke-Wulf 19s, the infamous Butcher Bird. The Focke-Wulf W-19 was everything the P-47 wasn't. It was light, agile, and an absolute terror at low to medium altitudes. Its roll rate was legendary. It could snap into a turn faster than any Allied fighter, and its four 20mm cannons were designed to tear bombers apart. The German pilots were experts at exploiting the P-47's weaknesses. They knew if they could lure the big American fighters into a turning dogfight below 20,000 feet, the P-47 was at a huge disadvantage. In the early days, ambushes were devastating. The sky would erupt into a swirling vortex of tracers and smoke as the nimbler German fighters danced around the heavier thunderbolts. Gabreski's radio would crackle with calls of "Break! Break! Watch your six!" as another P-47, caught in a maneuvering duel, trailed smoke and fell from the sky. The German aces were confident, even arrogant. They saw the big, clumsy thunderbolts struggling, saw them for what the critics said they were. For a moment, it often seemed they were right. American squadrons could be broken, scattered, and fighting for individual survival. The bombers were exposed. But the German pilots had made a fatal miscalculation. They had underestimated the plane, and more importantly, they had underestimated the pilots like Francis Gabreski, who were about to change the rules of the fight. Chapter 3. The Juggernaut's Revenge. Instead of trying to outturn the Focke-Wulf 19s, Gabreski would do the one thing the German pilots never expected from a heavy fighter. He'd push his throttle forward and climb. This wasn't running from the fight. It was executing the core tactic that Hub Zemke had drilled into the 56th Fighter Group for months. It was a combat philosophy born of necessity, a way to turn the P-47's greatest weaknesses into its most terrifying strengths. This philosophy rested on two pillars: altitude and speed. As Gabreski's P-47 clawed its way past 25,000 feet, something magical happened. This was the altitude where the P-47 was born to fight. The turbo supercharger, which didn't give the same edge at lower altitudes, came alive. It poured dense air into the massive R-2800 engine, letting it breathe in the thin, freezing atmosphere above 25,000 feet.
Up here, the P-47 was no longer a clumsy bathtub. It was a predator in its natural habitat. From 30,000 feet, the battlefield below was laid out like a map. The Wolfpack could see the FW-190s swarming the bomber stream. Then came the order. Gabreski would roll his 7-ton P-47 inverted and push the stick forward. The Thunderbolt didn't just dive, it plunged like a hawk. This was the P-47's ultimate trump card. Its immense weight and clean aerodynamics meant it could outdive any propeller-driven plane in the sky. Its airframe was so robust it could withstand forces that might tear the wings off other fighters. The airspeed indicator would spin past 500 miles per hour. The air would scream past the canopy. The German pilots below, their eyes glued to the bombers, would never see it coming. Gabreski would line up on an enemy fighter and hold the trigger down. A torrent of fire from 8 50 caliber machine guns, over 100 rounds per second, would erupt from the wings. The stream of lead and tracer didn't just hit the German plane, it sawed it in half. Startled, the other German pilots would brake hard, but Gabreski was already gone. He used the colossal momentum from his dive to execute a zoom climb, rocketing back toward the sun, trading speed for altitude. This was energy fighting. You never ever turned with an FW-190. You hit it from a direction it couldn't counter, with a speed it couldn't match, and then you vanished. His squadron, once scattered, followed his lead. The horizontal knife fight became a vertical slaughterhouse. The supreme effectiveness of this doctrine was proven on May 22, 1944. On that day, applying these very tactics, Gabreski attacked a Luftwaffe airfield in northwest Germany, shooting down 3 FW-190s in a single astonishing mission. The hunters had become the hunted. The dive and zoom tactics used by Gabreski and the 56th Fighter Group fundamentally changed aerial combat. They proved that victory wasn't just about having the most maneuverable plane. It was about mastering energy and fighting on your own terms. These principles are still taught to fighter pilots today. What do you think is more important in modern air combat, the raw performance of the jet or the tactical doctrine of the pilot? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. As Gabreski's squadron reformed, the sky would be quiet again. The bomber formations, battered but intact, would drone on. The Wolfpack had proven their point. They had embraced the very things their plane was mocked for. Its weight gave it an unbeatable dive speed. Its massive engine gave it unmatched high-altitude performance. Its rugged airframe allowed it to absorb incredible punishment and keep fighting. Luftwaffe ace Heinz Baer reportedly admitted the P-47 could absorb an astounding amount of lead and had to be handled very carefully. Back on the ground in England, the legend of the Jug grew. Bomber crews, once nervous about their huge escorts, now requested them. A saying began to make the rounds. If you want to get your picture taken, stand in front of a Mustang. If you want to make it home from the fight, fly a P-47. Francis Gabreski finished his tour in Europe as the top American ace with 28 confirmed aerial victories and 3 more aircraft destroyed on the ground. Every single one of his aerial victories was achieved from the cockpit of a P-47 Thunderbolt. After being shot down and spending time in a POW camp, he would go on to fly again, becoming a jet ace in the Korean War with 6.5 MiG-15 victories, making him one of only 7 Americans to be an ace in 2 wars. The plane he championed, the P-47, ended the war with a staggering record. The 56th Fighter Group alone was credited with destroying over 670 enemy aircraft in the air, the top-scoring fighter group in the 8th Air Force. They flew the P-47 by choice for the entire war. By 1945, Thunderbolts had flown over 746,000 missions and were credited with destroying thousands of enemy aircraft, 9,000 locomotives, and 6,000 armored vehicles. The story of Gabby Gabreski and his Thunderbolt is a timeless lesson that the best tool isn't always the newest or the sleekest. Victory belongs to those who master the tools they have, who see strength where others see only weakness, and who have the courage to fight not on the enemy's terms, but on their own. The Germans laughed at the 7-ton juggernaut until the day it taught them to fear the thunder. If the courage of Gabreski and the grit of the P-47 moved you, stand with us. Lock in your support by subscribing now. Hit like to honor every brave soul who fought above those skies. And drop a comment below. Tell us which moment in this mission hit you hardest, or what lesson from this story you carry forward. Your voice matters in this mission. Join the ranks of history-minded viewers who refuse to forget the warriors, the tactics, and the legacy of courage that shaped our world.